Cortex Automation 3. Adding VM hosts to dynamic address groups. The use case for this is needing to keep track of virtual machines being created, provide pre-approved access to the VMs without admin overhead. So if you have a subnet which has got a certain type of servers being put onto it and they need a certain type of access, this works perfectly for that. Every time one's added, you can run through, pick up the VMs and add them to the rule without having to commit, and equally you can remove them once they've been decommissioned. So remove the need for a firewall commit every time a new server is commissioned. So firewall rules don't have to be committed. This makes the actual the process of developing machines and having machines being brought up, as long as they're still in that the pre-approved bracket, means that you don't need a firewall rule for every time. You just need to approve a firewall rule, and then the servers will get added to that group. And then, as I said before, automatically clean up access once a server is decommissioned. So XSOAR will go on, it'll list the servers in the ESXi, and then it will look at its list, it will compare it to what was there before. If there is servers or IP addresses that were there before that aren't now, then you can programmatically remove those, so you're closing down the access as well as opening it up. The process, as we're going to go through, is actually fairly simple. You need to create the tags first. This is based on tagging for dynamic access groups. Create the dynamic address groups. So we're going to create a group, we're going to make it dynamic and add the criteria as the tag. Create the security policy referencing the dynamic access group. All dynamic access groups or dynamic user groups aren't populated until they're in a security policy being referenced. Commit the config, nice and simple and straightforward. I'm going to create the playbook on Cortex XSOAR. Use the VMware integration, because this is a multi-step thing. So VMware integration, retrieve the IP list from VMware, add the tagging automation, and then demonstrate it working. Okay, so first thing, straight on to create the tags for the groups, dynamic address groups, and security policy, commit the config, and that will be us done with the firewall. So following what we outlined earlier, what we're going to do now is create the tag. And for just the sake of it, the tag we're going to use, we're going to call purple. So I'll do this all in lowercase like the others. Let's see if we've got a nice purple we could use. Yes, we have. And this is hosts added to monitor VLAN LAN by XSOAR. Okay, tags help organize objects and they're the way addresses are referenced during this particular process. So the next thing to do would be to create our dynamic group. For this, address groups, add, and this is our monitoring. I am learning to touch type, as you can see. It's not going quite as smoothly as I might have hoped. And then we're going to add a match criteria for this. So basically what we're saying here is this is monitoring hosts, so let's just put a description in there. So add our match criteria. We've already created our tag previously, so we just add that purple. We can also add purple in here, and that would allow us to bring back the members of this group, so bring back the value of this group using the tag from XSOAR should we want to. And what XSOAR will do is it will add the IP and it will add the tag, and so thus it's put automatically into here. So now essentially we have to create a policy. Rules added to tags aren't then populated, so those lists aren't populated in dynamic list unless it is referenced in a security policy. So in order to have this, we're going to policies in its own time, and then we'll go down to where everything is here, and we will add a rule, and this is going to be our monitoring. This is host added to dynamic monitoring group. Okay. Source zone is going to be from our monitoring host zone. Our source address is going to be our dynamic group. Our destination zone is going to be outside for the minute because we just want this to have access to outside. Application is any, and application defaults there. We're going to allow it, not going to put any profiles on it at the minute, and we're going to log to Plex. Plex Splunk. So named because I ran out of servers to put Splunk on, and so I had to use my Plex server, which is hilarious when there's lots of logs going into it and people want to watch films. Okay, that will add it there. So now that basically is the configuration on the firewall. Because we've already got the API key on XSOAR, we don't need to do any, there's no fancy access required or anything like that. That will just do it, update it through the API. Now that's been added, that will populate when it picks up that there's hosts on the monitoring network, when it queries ESXi, and hopefully, all things being equal, that should mean that now I'm ready to go and I'll have access once that's occurred. I will just check and make sure, and there you go, see, nearly caught myself out. So I haven't actually got any NAT for hosts from that zone. So I'll have to just change the NAT rule as well. Zone there. Monitoring hosts. This is purely and simply because I didn't actually envisage putting anything on there at the minute, so just didn't bother. Okay, so commit, and we will add a description. So for monitoring hosts, and for auditing purposes and things like that, you can actually force the requirement for a comment before a commit is made. It does come in useful because it's a lot easier with a description or a comment to go back and work out why something was done. Usually a ticket number or something like that, or some personal reference, so that you could go back to either the person or you could trace it back to a ticket to find out why a change was made. And then we're going to commit, and then move on to the other part, which is the XSOAR part, and then we'll test it. So for the XSOAR build, this is the process we're going to follow. So we've got going to create a blank list. This is going to hold the IPs from the ESXi, and it's going to allow us at a later stage to have a reference point for IPs to remove. I'm going to create the playbook to do the following. Retrieve the IPs from the ESXi host. Build that list, so populate the list we've already created, and filter the IPs in the list using regex to get out the IPs that we want. So they'll all come in a big long list, and we obviously only want to tag certain IP ranges to certain tags. And then finally tag the IPs in the firewall, and missing from here, of course, is then close the incident, because we don't want loads of incidents building up in XSOAR. So this is the playbook that we're going to end up with, and as stated before, so it's going to get triggered by the incident. We're going to list the VMs on the ESXi server. We're going to build a list with that, and then that is going to come down to the automations here to tag for our varying subnets, and then we're going to close the incident. But as stated previously, the first thing we need to do is we need to get a list, and for that we go to Settings, Advanced Lists, and you can see I've already got the list here, which is the VMware ESXi hosts list. It's blank because it will be populated by the playbook as it goes. Adding a list is really simple. Just add a list. Doesn't need any data, and then we can populate that list from wherever we want. So you can populate that from HTTP. You can populate it from an integration such as VMware. That will then, you can then reference that list and then as you go further forward. But for this case specifically, we're going to use this one, and we'll get back to the playbook. Okay, so an explanation of what's on the playbook. Listing the VMs. I'm going to list the VMs by using the VMware get VMs integration, and I will just show you that as well. So we go to VMware. So this is the VMware. It's free. You can see the commands that are here. So actually you could change the NIC state. This could be used for if you want to, if you have some bad traffic coming off of a VM and you want to isolate that without switching it off, you could do that. You can create a snapshot from here, as that would suggest, get events of the VM, and then you can also do a lot of stuff by, when you list the VMs, you can get the UUID, and that then allows you to go on and use this stuff like creating a snapshot, because you have to reference it by the UUID. Suspend a machine. It's really quite good, and basically it just logs into ESXi. So it's just logging into my ESXi server on 443, and it just works. It's perfect in every way, frankly. So back to our playbook. Okay, so the important part here is the outputs. This is what is now going to be available to this this automation here that we're going to use here to populate the list. We could use the VM name, template, path to the VM, guest, UUID, IP, state, as it says there, i.e. powered on, powered off, suspended, host name or MAC address of the VM. We're going to use the IP because I found it a lot easier than when I attempted to do it with the name or the host name. Although in theory, and my plan at the time was to use if you had a string within the name, that then was the way it sorted it and the way it took that IP and then tagged it. However, that said, it's a lot more efficient to do it with the IP because that required going back up and finding the IP for that UUID. Okay, so then we go to list building. So this is using the IP from the previous task. So if I just click on this so we can see. So this is, we're going to use the VMware IP, which is easily selected here. So we've got list VMs on ESXi server, so it tells you what options are available to you at this stage. IP. We are not filtering it because we don't need to, because we're just dragging the IPs. The delimiter is a comma because it's a comma separated list, and we want only unique values. Actually, what I can do then is I can test that against there, and then that then shows you the result that you would get. So you can then sort of, it's the way of building it in a way. If you're not quite sure what what you're looking to do, just off the top of your head, you can look at the results that you're getting and then concentrate on how you're going to use them as you go further down. This is actually a very simple playbook. So from there we now have our list populated, and as a task to come off of all here from this task, so the third row, this is where the regex comes in. So what we're going to do is we are going to get the lists.vmware ESXi host, that's the one we populated previously. We're going to split it on the comma, because again we need the values, and then we're going to apply this regex. So this regex is extract all that match regex, and if you're watching this video then I'm sure I don't need to explain regex to you, but essentially all we're doing here is from the start of the line, any number, any amount of numbers before the point, so the dot, and again anything in between. But here we're changing it because we're looking for a 6, and that is because my subnet is 10.200.6. And then again for the host IP, and we're going to have any number and then call that the end of the line. Okay. So then once that's done, it will tag that IP using this integration, which is automation, which is Panorama Register IP tag. It comes with the PanOS integration, and then it will close the incident. And these will all run, and then they'll close the incident, because on this line they'll run, and then we end the playbook. So we will run that now and see if it works. Right, so we're going to create a new incident. We're going to call this incident dynamic IPs. I'm going to say it occurred today. It's informational. I'm going to choose our playbook that we've been working on, which is that one. And that's it. We don't need to stick anything else in. So we've created that. Refresh, and now you'll see it's disappeared. And there it is back. It's closed because we put the automatic close at the end. Look at the work plan. So we can see that all the tasks have been completed successfully. Registered the tag successfully. Register this tag. Register this tag. Okay, so if we now go back to the firewall, just quickly refresh that. You can see on the monitoring hosts that we've registered our IP there. And just to prove, I'll unregister the tag there. Unregister that purple tag. Okay, close. Unregister the purple tag. Close. Come back. Wow, this is embarrassing. If you go back to our phones here, and they're unregistered. So for some reason, and now it's unregistered the tag. Wow. Slightly embarrassing, but I don't like to cut away and try and make out that everything works perfectly, because then what happens is you sit there watching a video and you think, well, it worked perfectly for them, so why isn't it for me? Well, the fact is, it doesn't always work perfectly every time. Okay, so we're going to reopen this one, and hopefully, with any luck, it won't make me look like a possum's pecker. We can see it running as well now, which is sort of advantageous as well. It seems to pick that particular sequence in random as well. I don't really know why. I don't think there's any way of necessarily controlling it unless you were to stack them one on top of the other. Okay, so we close the incident, and now the moment of truth. And there we have it, re-registered. Crikey. And that's re-registered as well. Okay. So that's it. It's now working. That is the top and bottom of it. It's working. We can see this registering the tags. And then when we go to the list here, we can see that the list is being populated. Going to then move on from there when talking about cleaning up, you can use the reverse. So you can use panorama unregister IP tag, and you would use it against this list. So you'd need to create a legacy list, and then you would then compare the two lists. Okay, we created an automated way of scanning for hosts and adding them to a DAG, or dynamic address group. Later we'll look at the same strategy but in reverse to isolate VMs by unregistering the tags from the firewall rules based on any threat activity or any malicious URL calls or anything like that they're doing. That can be done exactly the same way as this, but obviously with unregister as opposed to register. That can also be utilised to clean up VMs on a regular basis. It could be done within the same playbook. However, I would suggest that hosts are brought up and down a lot more than the decommissioned, and if you were to start removing IPs from the lists with the frequency that you need to start adding them, you'd end up in a mess very, very quickly, and you'd start to cut a lot of activity off when machines have just been brought down for something or rebooted. If that happens to coincide with the run of your job, then that would cause a problem. So I'd suggest doing that once a week, whereas running a job to add IPs probably every half an hour. Then at least you know that that's going to be added every half an hour, and the people that are building the machines know it's going to be run every half an hour, and that scheduling can then start to be adhered to. So like and subscribe if you want to. I'll see you next time, and we'll go through the unregistering tags.